intellectually engaging.
The Constitution provides that the land must be registered under the customer tenure system, which is one of those that's recognized by the Constitution.
Ground Zero Season 2, live and syndicated on your public and national broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda. Welcome to Ground Zero Season 2, a show that brings you in-depth discussion ranging from politics, health, finance, sports, and so much more. Ground Zero Season 2.
UBC Radio. We are live and clear on 4 radio stations covering the entire Uganda. I welcome you, the people of Uganda, who are part of us from the time we started broadcasting this morning. Ampaire Amonotega is my name. Happy New Year for those that tuned in for the first time in UBC Ground Zero, today's edition. Congratulations to the people of Uganda upon what we have achieved in 2023 together as a nation, and for 2024. I have a very big privilege and honor to have in the studios of UBC a very, very special team of guests that we have put together to inspire, to transform, and educate us today in today's edition of UBC Ground Zero. And we're still talking about non-allied movement, and of course G7 that we're going to as a country. Some delegations are already here in the country, but I would love to know more about these two summits and especially the allied movement, to understand it more, to know the significance and how we are benefiting as a country, but most importantly as the people of Uganda. And in this edition of UBC Ground Zero, we're going to be earning on how best we are ready as a country, how prepared are we to host these two events, but also to make sure that our global visitors, those visitors that we are hosting from across the globe, non-allied movement membership is over 120 countries, and each country is sending its delegation here. And after that, we are going to host a group of 77 plus China, and would love to understand from the side of police, how ready are they? From the side of Ministry of Health and from the diplomats, how this is very important, but also we have put together 2 senior professors and lecturers to make us understand this. It is a big privilege and honor to have the Assistant Commissioner of Police, Nabaka Claire, is the Deputy Public Relations Officer coming from Uganda Police Force. You're welcome on this show, Afandi.
Thank you very much for having me this morning.
Interesting. It is also a very big privilege and honor to have you, Dr. Ambassador Patricia Kisemeiri, on this edition of UBC Ground Zero.
Thank you for having me.
We also have 2 doctors. It's a privilege and honor to have you, Dr. Robert Ojambo, or senior lecturer coming from Bogo University.
It is my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And of course, our own. I say our own is not the first time. We always have you, Doctor, and it is always a privilege and honor having you on UBC Ground Zero, Dr. Christopher Wanga, coming from Uganda People's Congress.
Indeed, warm greetings from the party president, Honorable Jim Akena, UPC fraternity at Uganda House, across the country and in the diaspora. They are tuned in and they are following this wonderful discussion, and they are very, very much happy that you are bringing back those glories very much afresh. Remember, we are very serious partners in non-aligned movement, and we introduced Uganda to the non-aligned movement in the 60s. So we are discussing an act of faith, our baby.
You are baby indeed.
Yes.
Welcome, gentlemen and ladies, to this edition of UBC Ground Zero. And our dear listener, we also welcome you. And you are going to be part of the conversation later on 0776 511 426, or you can send your messages on 0701 24 26 47. We're going to be streaming live on YouTube. You just put UBC Ground Zero and you'll be able to watch the guests that I have in the studios. This is UBC, and we're live on 4 radio stations: UBC Butebo in eastern Uganda, UBC West Nile in West Nile, but covering Teso sub-region, Acholi sub-region, Lango sub-region, and parts of Karamoja sub-region. And we're also live and clear on UBC Radio, covering entire Uganda, and also live and clear on Magic 100 FM, covering all parts of central Uganda. First things first, would love to understand what is NAM, how significant it is, and how important it is. And I'm passing on this very question to all of us in the studios. If I can start with the lecturers to educate us, because we always get knowledge from you, and I would love still to learn a lot from you. Dr. Ojambo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And I would like to also, in the same way, thank you for inviting me here. I think for us in academia, in the academia, we have been left out in most of these things. And I was really shocked when you gave me a call to come and discuss this. I come from the Department of History at Chambogo University, the department which I also head. And therefore, these are things that we talk about on a daily basis. It is even a topic in our study when we are teaching our students. We teach them about non-aligned movements and other movements that have taken place in the world. NAM is something that was started by two gentlemen who had similar ideas, and they were coming out of the same experience. Around about 1955, there was the then leader of Yugoslavia, President Tito, and the Prime Minister of India, Nehru, who had come out of experiences of struggling against imperialism, Indonesia struggling from USSR and declaring themselves independent, then India coming from the experience of being a British colony for a very long time in 1947, and what followed in 1948 with the struggle with the Pakistan. So after discussion, they decided that the best way to protect their sovereignty was not to get involved in especially the fighting that was taking place between NATO. NATO was a military organization of the Western Group, North Atlantic Treaty Organization of the Western Group, who were led by the United States and the many countries in Western Europe. And then the Warsaw Pact, which was under the USSR and the Allies. It had come out of the conflict that had started at the beginning of the Cold War in 1950s in Korea, where there was a conflict between South Korea and North Korea. And therefore, the group of NATO supported South Korea, and the group of Warsaw Pact supported North Korea. These two gentlemen found it that such things were undermining sovereignty, were undermining peace, and were undermining a lot of things that these countries were gaining at that time. So they decided to come up with a term called non-aligned. At first, just non-aligned. So later, this grows into a movement, and the other people join. The first group from Africa to join was of two gentlemen, Abdul Gamal Nasser of Egypt joined, and later our great forefather Kwame Nkrumah. Of course, later they were joined by Indonesia, and they became a group of 5. And that group of 5 had a lot of discussions, until the Bandung Conference in 1955. They started the idea and started selling it to each other. And in 1961, they had the first conference in Belgrade. At that time, Belgrade was part of Yugoslavia. Today, as we talk, I think Belgrade is part of Serbia. So that was the first conference. And since then, they came up with a number of things, agreed on the major ones, which I can just give, was one, sovereignty. They wanted to protect their sovereignty. Two, for example, Kwame Nkrumah is said to have been a star in that meeting. And he talked about peace a lot. For example, I've even been hearing on your radio here, he gave a very good speech, and he said that if you want peace, stop preparing for war. So if you want peace, just don't prepare for war. You will have means to solve issues peacefully other than through war. That was a very important thing. Of course, the other thing was to fight against colonialism and neo-colonialism. Remember, Kwame Nkrumah had already come up with the idea of neo-colonialism, reminding people that please don't forget that even if colonialism is gone, there is neo-colonialism. Then the other issue was human rights and the support of many countries that were getting independence in many different countries. So those were the major things that he brought up now. And it has grown from strength. It stagnated sometime there during the Cold War. There were a lot of problems. But it picked up as we talk now. It is a group of 120 countries, and I think after the conference that is going to happen in Kampala, there will be 121 because South Sudan is going to join as a new member. So that is
in
briefly,
Kampala summit.
Yeah, after the Kampala summit, we shall have 121 because South Sudan has already applied, and I think the application is almost accepted. They are just going to endorse it in the Kampala summit. Now, this summit is not only for members. When we talk about now the summits and why we call them a summit other than just a conference is that they are head of states, they are ministers, especially foreign ministers, they are diplomats from different countries, and for noting, we also have the UN, and I think the Secretary General and the President of the UN is going to be in attendance. So in my view,
this is historical in nature because we have never had these two presidents come together in such kind of engagements.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying it's a huge conference for our country. And I think we need to encourage people to read about NAM, to understand it, and speak about it from a point of knowledge. And I really, once again, want to thank you for involving us. I must say that even in the NAM conference, we are not involved at all. I speak for all the academic staff from public universities in this country, and we are not involved, and I don't know why these things happen. So I don't know whether in our country they don't value academics. I've seen all groups are involved, the musicians, but the academia has been left out, but we shall keep following them.
And they expect you to teach.
We teach, and they want us to teach their children, but they don't want us to practice.
All right.
They go on TVs and radios and say history is not relevant.
Interesting. Thank you, Dr. Ojambo. I will get to police later on how prepared they are in terms of security, deployment, and of course traffic. Allow me to start with you. You're a diplomat, the ambassador at that level, and I would have to understand also from you, how do the non-allied movement and the group of 77, the two different summits, very significant, contribute to the global diplomatic efforts?
Thank you, Aman, and I'm delighted to be here. As already said, I represent the International Municipal Cooperation Forum of the BRICS countries. Now it is BRICS Plus because it is no longer the big emergent economies of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but we have more countries, 7 on board, that were next, that joined January this year. Yeah, they applied and they were allowed to join. So, and part of those is Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates, and many. So that's why it's called the BRICS Plus. And so as an emerging economic bloc, it makes more sense for us to talk about especially G77 plus China. And the speaker talked about NAM, but I would like more a bit to speak about the G77. The need for international communities to align themselves with the goals of developing countries is not a thing that it's just started recently. It happened before, and the international communities were always concerned about developing countries, their trade, and their autonomy, and how they lived the other countries that were developed and those that were between developed and still developing. And therefore, back in the day, the international community brought about what we called the Havana Charter, or the International Trade Organization, that was supposed to be comprehensive and to bring developing countries on board and be able to integrate them in the economy world, to be also to develop. But due to the strifes that Professor Dr. Ojambo was talking about that led to the Cold War, there were different ideologies. The United States of America was advocating for capitalism and democracy, whereas the Soviet Union was advocating for communism and economic systems, or what they call socialism. So there was that split. Was kept, meddling in the affairs of other countries, and then we had the Korea War, and then we had the Vietnam War. But the Havana Charter, that was supposed to be timely and comprehensive at the time, was not ratified because of the differences. The United States of America had resisted domestically such a. So developing countries came up and they were not satisfied with the way trade was being conducted, with the tariffs and generally the whole economic world order. So because at the time the United Nations was the locus that had a lot of attention from different countries, these developing countries decided within the UN system to come up and have a political, social, and economic arrangements that would help them to get integrated into the world economic order. And he talked about Belgrade. There were many other events that led to the forming of G77 and NAM. And when G77 was formed finally in 1964, it did not stop there. The countries started struggling, and they actually realized that they could not just progress on their own. They realized that they needed to make cooperations with developed countries. And in 1970, most of the African countries, most of the developing countries, but basically African, that were highly dependent on oil, had a crisis because they realized that they needed to also align themselves with developed countries to create cooperations in order to create a platform that would help them to address their trade issues and the economic matters. And this is how China came in, because in 1971, China, having been diplomatically isolated from many organizations, was allowed in the UN as a member. And because it was a big emerging economy, the developing countries decided to, identify themselves with China, and this is how China came in. And these countries continued with the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The agenda of the G77 changed, and they started looking at their emerging problems like poverty reduction, climate change, environment, and this is what led to the to the Millennium Goals. You've all heard about the Millennium Goals. You've heard about the Sustainable Development of the 2000s, and this is what we're working on now. We have Sustainable Development Goals because developing countries realize that more than wanting to have solutions for themselves, they needed to keep tackling emerging problems that came with being developing countries.
Interesting.
And this is where we are. But back to your question of how they have contributed to the
global diplomatic efforts.
Yeah, to the global diplomatic efforts. I think for NAM has really fostered the South to South economic cooperation and development. I think when the developing countries came out to say we need collective solutions as countries that have a common problem, it is one sense of urgency that I've ever seen developing countries come up to say. You know, oftentimes we look at ourselves and we say we have these problems, and then we try every day to live within those problems and we don't find solutions. But with NAM in place and the G77, there was that sense of urgency of saying we need to collectively come together, know our problems and find a solution. And they also said, on top of that, we cannot just do this alone. We need to have cooperations with other countries that are both developed and those that are developing, so that we can trade together, so that we can be able to integrate ourselves in the economic world order. So NAM has done that, and of course the G77 as a group, they have been able to advocate for their purchasing power, for their capability to trade with other countries. And you've seen African countries and developing countries on peacekeeping missions. It's as a result of the formation of these groups. And you have also seen how NAM has been advocating for sovereignty, like Professor Ojambo said, that countries should not interfere with the autonomy of countries, of the independence of countries. As much as we want to cooperate on different levels, on trade, on the political and social, but countries should be able to make their own decisions and then take help when they need to. And NAM was also part of the countries or the groups of countries that advocated for states to be autonomous, for states to have sovereignty, for states to have independence. So I think along that route, they have done that. But we are yet to see, as we continue with this discussion, we feel that NAM is largely lacking in problems that affect especially African countries. When Libya was going down, we really hoped and we kept waiting for what NAM would do, and then NATO was there, and then we had NAM, we had the African Union, and we felt that the need to form those groups is still needs to be redefined. But also we've had coups in different African countries that are developing, and we are always waiting to see NAM, always to see the African Union.
Interesting.
Maybe, Mr. Moderator, let me just give a statement on G77.
Maybe later, Doctor, will give you time on that. We have been joined by Emmanuel Aineviona, the Senior Public Relations Officer coming from the Ministry of Health. If you can greet the people of Uganda, and later I will come back to you.
Good morning, dear listeners and viewers. I'm Emmanuel Aineviona from the Ministry of Health, and live back safely with no medical occurrence. Thank you.
I'm going to get into the details of that, how that medical occurrence and how prepared you are as the ministry to make sure that they are indeed safe in our hands. Dr. Rwanga.
Yes, please.
Dr. Ambassador Kshemeri and Dr. Jambo have given us the preamble, especially the background of non-allied movement and the G77 in details, and making or understanding the pioneers, the founders. But have we lived the expectations of Nehru and Joseph Tito and Kwame Nkrumah after 63 years down the road?
Thanks very much, Comrade Amoni Butega, for trying to throw that question to me. When you look at it critically, life is a struggle, and life is full of ups and downs. Those wonderful pioneers or founders, like the way you have mentioned the Tito was the Second World War veteran. And whatever he imagined, he wanted it to be implemented for the good cause of humanity. And indeed we saw a steady path of Yugoslavia. And some of the fruits of Yugoslavia under Tito we are having is just your neighborhood here. This showcase of our International Conference Center is a showpiece for Yugoslavia, a NAGO project. Because of the non-aligned solidarity, you will find the same structure in Zambia as the Amanda Hill, the National Parliament. Same structure, same text. So, when now you talk about the mentality or the philosophy of NAM, has it delivered? Yes, in your neighborhood it has delivered. Uganda was very active, Zambia was very active, and indeed Zambia was the first to hold this, to host even non-aligned. We have that showcase in a transfer of technology, in a solidarity, in a brother helping a brother. However, we have also to point out that much as Yugoslavia under Tito gave a basis of it, the enemies who never wanted that model of Yugoslavia standing in the center of Europe, trying to talk the success story of socialism or social democracy, it had to be crushed at a certain point. And it was very, very unfortunate states. But their good life, we had tested it. Their good story, we had tested it. At one time, they even said, Yugoslavia has trained a lot of skilled people in every field. And when I think, was it one of the countries in a European tournament pulled out last moment, and they brought in Yugoslavia, and Yugoslavia did the duty. Those of you who were here around the 1970s, when Germany faced pressure from the West, that you cannot do trade and what have you. I remember I was I was quite a boy, maybe in my primary. And Amin said, no, I have made a breakthrough now. We are going to do business with the Marshal Tito. And our streets in Kampala, they were commissioned at the Kolorea Strip. And I was happy that it was the first state function I ever attended, where they tried the buses. And those of you who sat in those buses, all those FAP trucks, they realized that Yugoslavia had reached a certain level of development and was not selfish to share the technology. So with Yugoslavia, we had achieved. Then our pace setter, as our other pace setters, happened to be India. India's graph has never gone down, and it is a symbolism to the spirit of non-aligned movement. Because non-aligned movement is to pull up each other, to pull up individually, such that you consolidate the gains. We are all sharing an experience that in NAM we are coming from a colonial past or an imperial past, which squeezed us and made us lose our self-confidence. But when you regain the self-confidence, don't look back, move forward, okay? And when you are moving forward, you assert yourself and you encourage others to come in, and you have that voice of non-aligned voice in global affairs, such that we see that our pace setters helped a lot. India helped to educate us, not only in politics, but in technical fields. And the way they evolved their technology especially why we should like these non-aligned countries which have made a breakthrough. They have not gone for heavily capital-intensive technology. They have gone for labor-intensive technology, which is part of our experiences.
Okay.
So we are seeing, allow me also to comment about Cuba, because these are the pillars of non-aligned movement. Cuba, even up to the post-Castro era, it is still showing that greater solidarity. When COVID broke up recently and it was causing problems, it was Cuba with those international volunteer teams which ventured in where COVID was killing people. And you remember when we had the Ebola in West Africa, again Cuba sent those various international medical teams to do the great work. So it is an inspiration. It is a big credit. And non-aligned never said, let us change language when we are attacking apartheid South Africa. They attacked South Africa in equal measure. And when South Africa got now its freedom in 1994, they welcomed South Africa to a greater family of non-aligned movement. So when you have such pieces of victories, it is an inspiration. And these days, since we have having challenges within the world, again we want non-aligned to champion, to create a platform, to come up with easy solutions, that sort of brotherhood, that sort of solidarity, that you are not left alone.
Okay.
Yes, the mere bringing it to Kampala is a signal of so many things. It is a plus for Uganda, it is a plus for East Africa, it is a plus for Africa, and there are a lot of things it brings. Because along the way, Uganda also offended the non-aligned members. How do you wake up and you chase Indians and you grab their property? Okay? But yes, during Amin's time.
Okay.
As if we are not members of non-aligned to behave like that. Sorry for the time I have wasted.
Not really. We are still learning from you. Thank you so much, Doctor. And now the country. But from your submissions, you to three doctors, one would say it is not about Uganda, it is about East Africa, it is about Africa, and all eyes are on Uganda, are on Africa and East Africa. But as institutions that are more concerned, we have the Ministry of Health here, represented by Emanuela Inebiona and also Afande Claire. Would love to know how safe or prepared the country is to make sure that we give good gesture to our visitors. Afande, how is the state of security and how is Uganda Police Force organized, prepared, and ready?
Thank you very much, Amon, and our listeners for tuning in to UBC. Having listened to the discussions by the previous panelists, maybe I would like to clearly bring out the purpose, one of the purpose of the NAM, which is articulating and promoting collective economic interests. Uganda Police Force, as a security agency, is geared towards building towards a socio-economic transformation. And this can only be made possible if we have a secure, safe and secure environment. Going forward, the Uganda Police Force, working jointly with all the other security or sister agencies, have been working tirelessly day and night to ensure that visitors are